The bottle of pills felt heavier than it should in Jonathan Pierce's shaking hands. 28 years old, worth $3 billion. And here he was, staring at the one thing that could end it all. Because 3 months ago he'd been running marathons, and now he couldn't even stand to reach the top shelf in his own kitchen. Yeah, that's how far he'd fallen. His wheelchair sat in the middle of a living room, so big it felt empty. Floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over a skyline his company basically built. Money couldn't fix a spine crushed by a drunk driver. Doctors had said it plain. No feeling below the waist, no recovery. He'd fired 6 caregivers in a month because he couldn't stand the pity. Today, he wasn't planning to fire anyone. He was planning to disappear. Then the doorbell rang. Loud, stubborn. "Mr. Pierce, I'm Denise Washington from Henderson Care Services. Afternoon shift." He barked into the intercom. "Didn't request anyone. Go away." Her voice came back, calm but firm. "I'm not leaving until we talk face to face." And for some reason, he hit the unlock. She walked in like she belonged. Scrubs, natural beauty, eyes that made him want to look away. "I'll be taking care of you starting today." He shot back. "I don't need anyone." She sat so they were eye level. "Pain makes people push others away. But I'm staying. I've got an 8-year-old who needs this job. So hard way, or easy way, I'm here. No pity. No sugarcoating." It cracked something in him. When she asked when he'd last eaten, he couldn't remember. She made him soup. He cleaned the bowl. And for the first time in months, the pills weren't the only option. Next morning she was back, bright as sunlight. "Good morning, Jonathan." He tried to be cold. Failed. She told him about Aisha, her daughter who wanted to help people walk again. He surprised himself by listening. Over days, she pushed him outside to the garden he'd abandoned. "The accident stopped your legs, not your mind or your heart," she said. He offered to let Aisha visit and help. The kids stormed in like a hurricane, declaring wild gardens were still beautiful. She made him see the weeds differently. That was twist number 1. Jonathan realized maybe he wasn't beyond repair. One Saturday, Denise arrived late. Aisha was sick. Jonathan told her to bring the girl over. He made ice chips, read her stories, even got her to eat soup by making airplane noises. That night, he told Denise, "This isn't about the job. You saved my life." She warned him not to mistake gratitude for love. He didn't. He told her he loved her, both of them. And slowly, a routine formed. Therapy, garden work, dinners together. For the first time, his house felt like home. Weeks later, Denise mentioned Aisha's school wasn't great. Jonathan offered to pay for private school. She hesitated, pride, but finally agreed, seeing it was for Aisha's future. The girl thrived. At a school festival, she introduced him to her friends as "my mom's boyfriend." And when he worried people would stare at his wheelchair, she shrugged. "So? My old teacher had one." Kids didn't pity. They were just curious. Watching her run a 3-legged race, hearing her whisper, "You came because you love us," Jonathan knew he was done hiding. That's when the big idea hit. A foundation for people with spinal injuries. Not just therapy and equipment, but community. Denise agreed to co-found it. Soon their dining room became a meeting space. Members started healing faster. Denise got into an accelerated nursing program, with a plan to do her practicum at the foundation. Aisha won a science fair project studying garden therapy. Yes, she used the foundation members as test subjects. One night, under the garden lights, Jonathan pulled out a ring. "Will you marry me, be Aisha's father, build this life with me?" She said yes. Aisha jumped into their arms, screaming, "Best day ever." The engagement went public. The media framed it like a billionaire and his caregiver fairy tale. Denise reminded him the only opinions that mattered saw them as family. 6 months later, Jonathan stood, literally. Leg braces, a few seconds upright. Enough to make Aisha scream and Denise cry. Doctors said he might even walk a few steps with help. Denise got offered a university position running a rehab counseling program, based at their foundation. Their garden became a community hub, proving broken things could grow beautiful again. One evening, Aisha, cheeks smudged with dirt, looked up and asked, "Do you think other people can have happy endings like us?" Jonathan smiled. "They just might not look like they expect." He thought about how his ending had become a beginning, how a stranger at his door had turned into a partner, how a little girl's hope had stitched his life back together. And here's the thing, you can call it fate, luck, stubbornness. Whatever you want, but it's harder to give up when someone refuses to give up on you. So what about you? If you were in Jonathan's place, would you let someone break through your walls? Or would you keep pushing them away? Where's the line between pride and letting yourself be saved? And the thing about letting someone in, it doesn't just change you, it changes the air around you. The way the house sounds in the morning, the way the day feels before you've even had coffee. Jonathan started noticing it in small things. Aisha's laughter drifting down the hallway. Denise humming in the kitchen, the smell of something cooking that wasn't from a takeout box. He'd wake up not thinking about what he'd lost, but about what they might do that day. The Pierce Foundation was no longer just an idea, it was alive. Twice a week, their living room filled with people in wheelchairs, walkers, crutches, each with a story, each with a fight still left in them. Denise handled intake with a nurse's precision and a mother's warmth. Jonathan ran workshops on adaptive tech, and Aisha, well, she made everyone feel like they belonged. No titles, no pity, just friends. One afternoon, a new member rolled in, a young veteran named Tyler. Combat injury, same level of spine damage as Jonathan. But his eyes had the same dead weight Jonathan remembered seeing in his own mirror. Not here to make friends, Tyler muttered. Jonathan didn't push, just handed him a cup of coffee and said, "Neither was I." 2 weeks later, Tyler was out in the garden with Aisha, arguing about whether tomatoes were technically fruit. It was during those weeks that Jonathan's recovery took an unexpected turn. Leg braces, parallel bars, hours of sweat and frustration. Then one day, for shaky steps. Denise cried harder than he'd ever seen. Aisha filmed it on her tablet like it was breaking news. Next up, Daddy Jonathan's marathon, she laughed. He laughed too, but deep down, a new kind of fire caught. This wasn't about walking. It was about proving to himself he could keep moving forward. But progress brought its own challenge. An old business partner reached out. Pierce Industries wanted him back as the public face of the company. The board loved the inspiring comeback angle. Jonathan hesitated. "They want me because of the chair, not in spite of it," he told Denise. She looked him dead in the eye. "Then make sure you walk in there as the man who built the company, not as their mascot." So he did. At the quarterly meeting, he wheeled in, stood for exactly long enough to greet the room, then sat back down and talked numbers, strategy, innovation. No pity applause. No syrupy speeches, just respect. When the meeting ended, the same board members who'd tiptoed around him after the accident were leaning in, asking for his take on projects again. That was his second twist, realizing he didn't have to choose between the foundation and the empire he'd built. He could lead both. At home, the family rhythm kept growing stronger. Denise juggled nursing school and the foundation. Aisha won first place in the state science fair for her Healing Gardens project. And Jonathan found himself planning a wedding that was less about flowers and table settings, more about making a promise in front of the people who mattered. The night before the ceremony, he sat in the quiet garden, the one they'd brought back from weeds and neglect, thinking about the day Denise walked in and refused to leave. A year ago, he'd been ready to vanish. Now, he was planning a life so full it scared him in the best way. And yet, there was that question in the back of his mind. Could they keep this going when real life came crashing in? The media attention, the demands of running two worlds, the fact that every step he took came with pain. But then he heard the back door creak, and Aisha padded out in her pajamas, clutching a flashlight. Couldn't sleep, he asked. Wanted to check on the garden. Thought maybe the flowers needed a good night. She shone the light over the roses, the lavender, the beds they'd planted together. They're still here, even after storms. Jonathan felt the words sink in. Yeah, still here. Still growing. Still worth tending. Tomorrow, he'd stand, if only for a moment, when Denise walked down the aisle. And maybe the next day he'd be back in the chair, and maybe the day after that he'd take 5 steps instead of 4. But this was the truth he'd carry now. He wasn't waiting for life to get back to what it was. He was already living it. So, here's the question. What would you do if the thing you thought ended your story turned out to be the start of the one worth telling? Would you fight for it, even when it hurt? Or would you wait for the storm to pass and risk missing the sunrise?